Guys, and welcome back. And we are going to be looking at how we actually use our built-in functions and some of the mathematical operators. And we're going to be looking at simple programs, and obviously it will actually advance to a little bit more difficult. So let's get started, right? The first program we're actually going to be looking at is there, right? So given two angles of a triangle, determine and output the third angle. Now, this is simple mathematics, guys. So we need to determine the third angle. And from mathematics, we know that in any triangle, the three angles add up to 180 degrees. So the first thing we're actually going to do is, for input, right, we want side 1 is assigned input and enter the first, sorry, it's not side, it's angle. Enter the first angle, right? And then angle 2 is assigned input, enter the second angle. Now, guys, remember what I said yesterday? We can go and typecast this because remember, input enters everything as string. So at the moment, angle 1 and angle 2 are string. Remember, we can come in front here and go and put in int, and we can typecast that all in one line. We can read it in as a string. That's what your input will do, and int will convert it into an integer, and it'll store it in angle 1 and angle 2. So right now, all we need to look at now is our processing. So the sum of angles of a triangle add up to 180. So we have two angles. To determine the third angle, we have to subtract. We have to actually subtract the two angles from 180 degrees. So let's go with angle 3 is assigned. Now it's going to be 180 minus, and we're going to add these two angles. So to add, it's going to be angle 1 plus angle 2, right? So you're going to add angle 1 and angle 2. You're going to subtract it from 180, and you're going to get the third angle. That's your remaining angle. So if we look at our output, right, we are going to say print the third angle equals. Now remember, angle 3 is an integer. We can only join a string to a string. So once again, we have to do our cast angle 3 into a string. And if we run this, remember, save. Right, so let's assume we go with 45. The first angle is 45 and the second angle is 100, right? The remaining angle will be 35. Now, if you add 100 plus 45 plus 35, you're going to get 180. If we run it one more time, try different angles, and we could go with 23 and 69, and we'll end up with 88. So that's simply subtraction, addition and subtraction. So we looked at addition. Now we're actually going to be looking at using our other mathematical functions. And remember, our other mathematical functions, we've got add, subtract, multiply, divide. Remember, we have two types of division. We have integer and we have float. All right, so let's go and look at, just give me a moment. Right, let's go and look at something that is not that complicated. Okay, so basically the question is, allow the user to enter the length of a side of a square and determine an output, A, the perimeter, and B, the area, right? So remember, it's like our rectangle that we did the other day, right? So what is the formula for perimeter for a square, right? So basically, perimeter is going to equal to 4 times the side, because all sides are equal. Remember that? And we basically have to add the 4 sides or multiply it by 4 to get our perimeter. And area would equal to side times side. Okay? But we can actually do this a little bit differently, and I'm going to show you the 2 or 3 ways of actually calculating the area. So firstly, we have our input. So from the question, allow the user to enter. When you see a phrase like that, it basically means input, and you're entering the length of a side, a single input. So we're going to go with side is assigned. That's my typecast, guys. And then I'm going to put my input statement in there, and a user-friendly statement, enter the length of the side of the square. Okay, so the user is going to enter as a string. Int will cast it into an integer, and side will be an integer. So moving on. So we're looking at our processing now. Okay, please understand in the beginning when you first start, please put in comments to say which is your input, which is your processing, just so that it will help you remember when you look back at your previous programs. You don't actually have to do it all the time. So processing. So firstly, we need a variable. Now remember, we're going to calculate the perimeter. It needs to be stored somewhere. And that's why we actually have a variable called perimeter that would store the perimeter. And that would be assigned simply 4 times. And what is the variable that has the side? It's called side. So 4 times side, and that would actually give you your perimeter. To calculate your area, actually, guys, remember I told you when all variables should be in lowercase. Right, so that would equal to, and it's going to be side times side. That's one way of actually working it out. Okay, so let's go look at our output, and we need to output the perimeter, and we need to output the area, and we want to make it user friendly, so we need to put a message in our print statement. So we're going to go with print the perimeter equals plus. Now remember, At this point, perimeter is an integer, area is an integer, right? So you can only join a string. Another word for join is concatenate. We can only join a string to another string. So we have to typecast perimeter. All right. And then lastly, we're going to go with print the area equals, and we're going to go with plus, and once again we have to typecast the area variable into a string. All right, so once again we're inputting our side, the length of the side as a string. Int is going to convert it, cast it into an integer, and side is going to become an integer. Perimeter is 4 times the length of the side, and area is side times side. Now let us run it and check, and we'll put in a simple question, okay? A simple length. Let's go and put in 5. So if we enter 5 times 4 is 20. That's our perimeter, and 5 times 5 is 25. And there you go. But it doesn't really look very, very user-friendly. So what we're going to do is we're going to come here and say in either centimeters or meters or whatever it is, right? So let's assume we'll say enter the side of the square. Sorry. In centimeters. So to make our output a little bit more meaningful and user-friendly, remember that whenever you are outputting or giving feedback to the user, it needs to be as simple to understand as possible. If you be just going to display numbers out there, the numbers mean nothing. So we actually have to put little comments here, little statements telling the user what exactly is being output. And I'm going to go and join that to the word centimeters. So this would basically display the perimeter equals whatever the answer is and centimeters, right? And here we can say centimeters squared. Right. Now, before I actually run this, I just want to show you this. Okay. Firstly, I'm going to make that comment because what is the other way of calculating the area? Remember this from yesterday? Pow. And basically it's the side squared, so it'll be to the power 2. See that? Okay, so we can either go and multiply it or we can do it this way. And there's one more way. We're going to look at that just now, right? So I'm going to go and enter 5 again. I'm going to enter 5 again. And remember, it's going to be 20 and 25. And that makes a lot more sense. The perimeter equals 20 centimeters. The area equals 20 centimeters squared. Now, miss this out. What is the third way of actually calculating the area? And this is something we did with mathematical operators right at the beginning. An area is assigned, and check this out. It's going to be side asterisk asterisk 2, and that is actually side squared, side to the power 2. So let's run this and check it out. Okay. So enter the length of the side. I'm going to enter, say, 7. 7 fours are 28, 7 sevens are 49. And there we go. Perimeter equals 28 centimeters. The area equals 49 centimeters, right? So these are the 3 different ways we can actually raise we can actually square a value. Pow, side comma 2, or side double asterisk to the power 2. So remember, if this was a question in a test or an exercise, you could have used any one of these three and it would be correct. All right, so let us look at something a little bit different, and that is going to be percentage. All right, now you basically have to read in a learner's mark and determine and output the percentage if right, the total mark is 35. Now you guys know that when you write a test in school and you need to work out your percentage, it would be your mark, right? So let's just go and look at it. How would you work out the percentage? Your percentage would equal to your mark divided by the total mark times 100. So our total mark here is 35. This your mark, that is your mark. So this is what we have to read in. Read in, once again, another way of saying input, A, meaning a single input, learner's mark. So obviously the mark is going to be less than or equal to 35, and determine an output, the percentage if the total mark is 35. So that's our formula there. So once again, now just remember, we are going to be using some math functions. So we're going to say import math. Remember that from yesterday. And you'll see why just now. Now, just remember, your mark will be an integer. So when we're looking at our input, we are basically going to say mark is assigned, and once again, cast it, and then input, right? Okay, and we're going to say enter learner mark. So the user is going to enter a mark there. It's going to convert it into an integer, and it's going to store it in the variable mark. All right, now we need to calculate the percentage, and that is our processing. Oh, right, that is our processing. And once again, there's it here. That's our processing. So I'm going to go with percentage. Oh, sorry. I'm going to go with percentage. That's my variable is assigned. Now remember, I've got a single slash. So that is what type of division? That is real division, a float division. So that means we're going to get a decimal answer. Just remember that, right? Okay. And I'll show you what we're talking about now. So percentage is equal to the mark that the user entered is in the variable mark divided by 35 times 100. And that would give me my percentage. So I can go and output it now, right? And to output, it's going to be print. And we're going to say percentage equals, and we're going to make this a little bit user friendly, right? So it's going to be plus, once again, percentage. What data type is percentage? Because we're doing real division here, percentage is a float. So I'm going to just make a note here. Percentage is of type float. Once again, we can only join a string to a string. So we're going to cast percentage into a string. And just to make it a little bit user friendly, I'm just going to put a percentage symbol in quotes. So it will display whatever mark, whatever value with the percentage symbol. Now, we're not yet done with this, right? So we are going to see what our output is. So let's assume you actually ended up with 17 out of 35. And I want you to look at that answer. Can you see all those decimal values there? It doesn't look very, very tidy and neat. In fact, if you look at it, you got 571428, 571428. It carries on, right? So what exactly are we going to do here, right? Now, we're going to come back here. We're going to come back here and we are going to do one of two things. One, we can round it off to a whole number, or we can round it off to two decimal places. Let's try two decimal places first. So I'm going to still use percentage is assigned, and remember it'll be math dot and O. Oh, there is no round there. Let's go with round, right? That's fine. And it's going to be percentage comma 2. So percentage is going to be rounded off to two decimal places. Now, if you look at our output here, if you look at our output, to two decimal places, it'll be 48.57. So let's run this again. Okay. Right, so I'm going to enter 17 again so we can see the difference. And there we go, 48.57%. Now, once more, remember we can either have the number of decimal places, and if I take that out, it's going to round it off to the nearest whole number. So, right, let's go and run this now. Once again, save it. Same mark, so we can see the difference between the three. This here, not rounded off at all. This here, rounded off to two decimal places. And because this is a 5, rounding off to the nearest whole number will make it 49. All right? So just remember that you are never going to be told to use round. They might just tell you determine and output the percentage to the nearest whole number. They're not going to tell you use round. You need to know, okay, I need to use round to actually do this. Right. So moving on. Right. When we're looking at converting simple stuff. So we looked at the square and we looked at the percentage. Let's look at temperature. Now, you know, in South Africa and in Britain, etc., we actually measure temperature in degrees Celsius, and America, etc., it's in Fahrenheit. And to convert from Celsius to Fahrenheit, we actually use this formula here. So we are going to be looking at taking that formula and converting it into Python code. So given also input a temperature in Celsius, determine an output, the temperature in Fahrenheit. Okay, so let's go. We are going to be looking at our input, and we need, well, let's just call the variable Celsius is assigned. Now here's the thing. Do we read it in as a float, or do we read it in as an int? Let's read it in as an int. So my typecast int, input, and enter the temperature in degrees Celsius. Once again, the user is going to enter the temperature. It's going to be a string. Your int here will convert it into an integer and store it in Celsius. Moving on to the next step, which is our actual processing. There's our formula here. There's no multiplication symbol in Python, you know that. And that is what kind of division? That's float, right? So we're going to go with Fahrenheit. Remember I told you your variable names need to be meaningful. That means just by looking at the name of the variable, you would understand what is actually stored in there. In a previous program, we used percentage, etc., right? We used perimeter, we used area. So anybody looking at the name of the variable would understand immediately, okay, so this is what it represents. So Fahrenheit is assigned C represents your temperature in Celsius. So F is our Fahrenheit variable, is assigned, okay, let's go with brackets. And what are we putting in here? Celsius times 9 divided by 5. We're going to work that out first. And then we are going to say plus 32. Just to mention that in programming, we still follow the Bodmas rule, meaning, right, we still follow the Bodmas rule, right? And how do we go about doing that? Oh, sorry about that. Right? So your Bodmas rule, it's brackets first, and then off actually represents multiplication. And then you got division multiplication, that's on the same level. Now remember, if you have both division and multiplication, you actually start working on the left. You got it? Right? And even addition and subtraction, they're on the same level, but if you have only addition and subtraction, you start working from the left and you start simplifying every pair, right? So basically what's going to happen here is you're going to take that multiplied by 9, you'll get, well, this is what Python would do. It would take Celsius multiplied by 9. It would get an answer. It'll take that answer, then divide it by 5, and it'll get another answer. And then it will add it to 32. Now remember, what data type is Fahrenheit? To determine the data type, we look at what mathematical operations we're doing. So that's multiplication, and that is real division. It's float division. So Fahrenheit is float. So once again, right? Okay, we're going to go with print, and I'm going to show you how we're going to make this a much more user-friendly statement, right? But we're just going to start off with this first. Remember, whenever you design programs, whenever you write programs, it has to be as user-friendly as possible. That means you need to give simple instructions and simple statements to the user so they can easily understand what exactly they have to do and what exactly the output actually means. So we're going to say temperature in Fahrenheit equals, and once again, we have to cast Fahrenheit to string, and we're going to display that. And I'm going to actually do a few more things, and you'll see what we're going to be doing with that. Okay. Okay. So let's assume, I mean, in our country, we're looking at maybe 28 degrees. And in Fahrenheit, it's 82.4, right? So if I run it again, and if I enter 17 degrees, 62.6, right? What if I wanted to make this a much more user-friendly statement? So check this out. I'm going to come here at the beginning and I'm going to say STR. My original temperature is in Celsius. STR Celsius. So what's going to happen now? It's actually going to come here and whatever the user entered, if we entered 17, it'll say 17. And we're making the statement much more user-friendly. We're going to say 17 degrees Celsius is right, is, and I'm going to come here. Oh, I'm going to come here and we're going to say whatever degrees Celsius is, so many degrees, degrees Fahrenheit. Right, let's see how that works. Okay, so I'm going to enter 16. Check it out. 16 degrees Celsius is 60.8 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you look at it, okay, and if you look at it, right, just give me a moment, guys. Just need to sort something out. Okay, so if you look at this here, the first one just says temperature in Fahrenheit equals that. Temperature in Fahrenheit equals that. And 16 degrees Celsius. Now, where did the 16 come from? The user inputted. So 16 degrees Celsius is 60.8 degrees Fahrenheit, right? And if I wanted it rounded off to the nearest whole number temperature, once again, I'm going to go with Fahrenheit is assigned round, and it's going to be Fahrenheit. So that would round it off. So let's run this. I'm going to enter 16 again. And remember, when we entered 16, it was 60.8. Now it should be 61 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so you can see how we're using the round. Now, we are going to look at something that's a little bit more challenging. All right. Let's look at this question. Pretty straightforward. Capture the hours worked. Now, once again, capture means input, user input. Capture the hours worked and the rate per hour from the keyboard. Capture the hours worked and the rate per hour from the keyboard and determine and output the salary earned. All right, now let's look at this. How many items of data are we going to input? So we have hours worked and we have rate. Now, hours worked and rate, we have to decide how exactly are we going to input them? Are we going to input them as float or string? Or int. So think about it. Somebody works hours. They don't necessarily work whole number hours, like 6 hours. They might have worked 7.5 hours. 7.5, 7.5 is float. Rate per hour. Now, whenever we're dealing with money, remember that anytime we're dealing with money, it's float. Because you have rands and you have cents. So let's go with hours and underscore worked. Hours worked is assigned and it's going to be float. input, and we're going to ask the user to enter the hours worked. Okay. Then we need rate per hour. So I'm just going to use the variable rate is assigned. Once again, rate, remember it's money, so it's going to be float. And we're going to input. All right. And we're going to ask the user, enter the rate per hour. So we've got our two values and we cast it into float. So the user is entering the hours worked and the rate. Now, let's get to our processing. Now, if you look at the formula above over here, your salary is hours times rate. So we're going to go with a variable called salary is assigned. And what variable is our hours worked stored in? It's in the variable hours underscore worked. Multiplication is asterisk times your rate. So if you're looking at this now, we've calculated our salary. I'm just going to leave a few extra lines and you'll see why just now. And we are looking at our output and we're going to say print the salary. Oh, wow. The salary earned is, and once again, salary is going to be of type float, and we have to cast it into output it, and we're going to go with salary. Right, so let's run this and see what we get. Okay, so let's assume you worked 12.5 hours and your rate of pay was 67 Rand 48. And the salary earned is 843.5. It's actually not 0.5, it's 0.50. It's 843 Rand 50. But that 843 doesn't really look as user-friendly as possible. So I'm going to come here, check this out, and I'm going to put an R. So in other words, it's going to output the salary earned is, and the R would be there for the rands. Run this again, and let's assume we worked 47.5 hours, and you were earning 98 Rand 23. And now I want you to look at that. The salary earned is, and you see the R for rands, 4,665 Rand and 92.5. 92.5, 925, nope. We needed it rounded off to 2 decimal places because it's rands and cents. So what does that mean? We have to come here and we basically going to say salary is assigned round, and we're going to round salary off to 2 decimal places. Okay, spelled that wrong. And let's do that. I'm going to enter 47.5 again, 47.5 and 98.23. Can you see that, guys? 4,665 Rand and 93 cents. So the 925, it rounded off to 2 decimal places and it becomes 93. Okay, so let's look at something a little more challenging. I like this question. By the way, that's not an N, that's pi. Pi, right? Mathematically, pi is actually uh, 22 over 7, but Python actually comes with a value that's already constant, and it actually belongs to the math class. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. Step one, our input, right? Given the radius of a circle, so we're reading in the radius, determine an output. The circumference is 2 times pi times the radius, and area is actually pi times radius squared. This just went off over here. It should be squared. Okay, so once again, we can do the following. We need to input how many values, guys, right? Given the radius of the circle. So it's just one single input, and I'm going to call my variable radius is assigned. I'm going to use int. I'm going to cast it into int. Input, enter the radius of the circle. So the user will enter the radius of the circle. Then we have our processing. So for the processing, right? For the processing, we need to do two things. Firstly, we need to work out the circumference. And secondly, we need to work out the area, right? So now the word circumference, we can use the word circumference as a variable, right? It's meaningful. So we are going to go with circumference is assigned. Now I want you to look at that formula. It's 2 times pi. Pi is actually 22 over 7, but we don't actually have to do that, because if I do this math dot and go with, can you see that? Math dot pi. So it actually has it in the math class pi. So we don't actually have to do a calculation. And it's going to be times radius. Okay. Then, now just remember, we got area is assigned and it's radius squared. Now we remember we can square it in in 3 different ways. Okay, we can multiply the radius by itself, or we can use pow, right? So let's use pow. So it's going to be area is equal to pi. Once again, math dot pi times, and what is it, guys? It's going to be radius comma 2, and that would square it. Okay. Now I want you to understand something, that your circumference and your area will be of type float, because pi is a float number, right? So we will come back and round that off just now. And we're going to have 2 statements. We're going to have print the circumference is, and remember circumference is a float. We have to make it a string to output it. So, okay. And we're going to output our area. The area is And once again, cast it into string, and it's going to be area. Okay, we will come back to this just now, to this processing part, to actually look at what we're going to do. So let's assume the area, this radius of the circle was 10 centimeters or 10. And you look at some really, really confusing numbers there, right? Really confusing. So what do we have to do to make it less confusing? We have to round both the circumference and the area of, let's assume, to 2 decimal places, right? So come back here and and I'm going to do something a little different now. Okay, I'm just going to combine some things like we combined int and input here. We're going to do that here, but I'll show you this first. So it's going to be circumference is assigned round, and it's going to be circumference, comma 2. We're saying 2 decimal places, right? I'm going to come here, enter the radius of the circle. I spelled radius incorrectly here. Enter the radius of the circle in centimeters. You'll see why I'm doing that. Coming back to our area, area is assigned round, area, comma 2. All right, so we've got that rounded off. This is going to be in centimeters. And once again, the circumference is, and to make it more user-friendly, I'm going to come here and say the circumference is so many centimeters, and the area is whatever the area is, plus, and it's going to be, whoa, centimeters squared. Right. So let's go run this. Check it out. Remember, we're rounding it off to 2 decimal places. I'm going to enter 10 again. So there we go. The circumference is 62.83 centimeters, and the area is 314.16 centimeters squared. And that's a lot more meaningful. Now, just to show you how we actually coming back, and I'm just going to show you how we actually combine things, not to confuse you, right? I'm just going to leave this as comments so you can see how that was actually rounded off. But I want you to look at this. If we can combine int and input, we can combine this statement with a round. So the first thing I'm going to do is go and put 2 brackets in front and 2 brackets in the back. And in front here, I'm going to say round. It's going to do the calculation inside the inside brackets. And then the outside brackets belongs to round. I'm going to say comma 2. Similarly, I'm going to come over here and say round, right? It's going to, that's for that. Can you see that? And it's going to be comma 2. So I want you to look at the number of open brackets we have. 1, 2, and 3. And how many close? 1, 2, and 3. So in other words, right, if you were actually typing this out without what I did now, I'm going to say area is assigned. This is just to, so you don't get confused. I'm going to say round, open bracket, and I'm going to come here and say comma 2. That's to 2 decimal places. Now in front of the comma, I'm going to put a bracket in there, and I'm going to come here and say math.pi times pow radius, comma 2. Can you see that? So first, I went and did my round and with my comma too, and then I just put my calculation in front here. All right, so it's going to do the same thing. All right, I'm just going to comment this out and let's run it again. I'm still going to enter 10, so you can see that the answers are going to be the same. Can you see that? So what did we look at? We actually looked at combining our round with our calculation. So we can actually do quite a bit of stuff in one statement, right? We can actually even do calculations in here in your print statement. So you need to be very clear about, your open brackets, your closed brackets, etc. Right? That is why you'll notice that when I open a bracket, I close it immediately and then I go inside. When I put a single quote, I put another single quote and then I go inside. So that way I don't miss anything out and it's a good habit to actually follow. Okay, so I want you to look at this question. All right, read in seconds and convert to minutes and seconds and display. Read in seconds. So if I told you 320 seconds, it's actually 5 minutes and 20 seconds. If I told you 635 seconds, it's actually 10 minutes and 35 seconds. Now, this is where we actually use one of our mathematical operators. We're going to be using integer division and we're going to be using the mod. Remember the mod, it divides two numbers, gives you the remainder. Let's look at it. So firstly, I'm going to read in minutes and I'm going to read it in as an int. Check it out, open close bracket, come inside, input open close, go back inside, single single, go back inside and enter the number of seconds. Okay, I'm going to take this cast out here because we did the cast already in our input statement. Now let's go look at the processing. So firstly, I've got seconds. I want to convert it to minutes. How many seconds make up 1 minute? 60 seconds. So if I had 120 seconds for me to know how many minutes it's going to be, I'm going to divide the 120. Sorry, this is not minutes. I'm supposed to read in seconds. Sorry about that. So I need to divide the seconds by 60. But remember, it's not float division, it's real division. So I'm going to come here and say minutes is assigned, and watch this. It's going to be seconds slash slash. Remember, that's integer division, and I'm going to divide that by 60. So that would actually give me my minutes. Now, there are two ways I could actually do this. I have the number of minutes, yes or no, right? I can multiply minutes by 60 and subtract it from the seconds, but that's a little bit confusing. And obviously I'm going to have a remainder, right? If I divide 120 by 60, I get an answer of 2 and the remainder is 0. If I had 130 seconds, it will still give me 2 because that's integer division right here. And I'm still going to have 10 seconds. How do I get the remainder? What's left? And that, guys, I'm just going to call it rem seconds, remaining seconds, is assigned, and check this out. It's mod 60. Now, remember I told you the other day, mod divides two numbers and gives you the remainder. So you can actually quickly work this out, and I'll show you what I'm talking about, right? Let me just show you very quickly. Remember we were doing calculations here, right? So don't worry about that for now. I'm just going to show you the calculation. Like I told you 120 divided by 60, that's integer, it's going to give me 2. That's integer division. If I said 120 slash 60, it's going to give me 2.0, which I don't want. I want the 2. So I have to use integer division. Now, if I told you 130 seconds divided by 60, that's still going to give me 2, but I want the remainder. Now 60 times 2 is 120, so there's a 10 seconds remainder, yes or no? So I'm going to go 130 mod 60, and you'll see it gives me the 10. Can you see how that gives me the remainder? So if I had 150 divided by 60, that's 150 seconds, that's actually 2.5 minutes, but it's actually 2 minutes. And how many seconds left? 2 minutes, 120 seconds. There is 30 seconds left. Can you see that? So I'm going to come here and output that now. So we want to output it in minutes and seconds. Okay, so we're going to say print. And once again, I'm going to say, I'm making it as user-friendly as possible. Seconds, whatever the user entered, 150 seconds equals plus. Now, understand one thing, we need the minutes. So we're going to say str minutes. And I need to, and I need to actually go and put in the word minutes over here. So if the user enter 150, it'll say 150 seconds equals 2 minutes. And we need our remaining seconds. So that's going to be str again, rem seconds plus seconds. And you'll see how this actually works. All right. And oh, I forgot the plus here, guys. Can you see that? All right. So here we go. I'm going to go and enter 150. Check it out. 150 seconds equals 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And if I run it one more time, and if I go and enter, okay, let's just close this. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm going to go and enter. I told you 635 is 10 minutes and 35 seconds. There we go, 10 minutes and 35 seconds. So once again, just remember, I'm just going to put this on the screen over here, and it's, guys, a few learners actually emailed me yesterday and asked me for the questions which I sent to them. So please email me so that I can send you the questions. And for those of you that actually missed any lessons out, please email me and I'll send you the link to the YouTube channel where you can actually view the lessons that you've missed. All right. So thank you guys. Hope you actually learned something today, and please practice. And all of these programs that I've done, please go back to YouTube, watch it again, and practice. And if you have any questions, so please email me. There's my email address. All right. So thank you so much, guys, and have a good afternoon, and we will meet tomorrow at 2.